Khampepe Commission of Inquiry, chaired by retired South African judge Khampepe, is ready to begin hearings on Monday. The Commission says it will rely on the institutions of justice to help supply information and documents. This, as some people who were present when the apartheid-era crimes are committed are no longer alive. The Commission is looking into whether attempts were made to prevent the investigation and prosecution of apartheid-era crimes.
We estimate that it is around 3,000 cases, and we want to understand what happened to each and every case that was referred to either the police for further investigation or to the NPA for prosecution, because we believe that every family impacted by this delay, every family who has complained about a particular incident, they deserve the truth, they deserve justice, and it is our belief and our role and responsibility to make sure that we get to the bottom of it.
Our reporter Nqobile Madlala is tracking that story and joins us live. Nqobile, earlier you and I spoke about possible outcomes, some of the expectations from the people who are tracking this story as much as you are. Just walk us through some of those expectations.
Well, one of them is to ensure that there's justice for the families. In fact, if you look at the statement that was released by the presidency, they talk about the fact that there's been allegations of interference for a very long time. So they need to get to the bottom of that to find out exactly what happened with regards to those 3,000 cases that we heard from Liano speaking to us about those cases in terms of what they will be looking at. But we know that tomorrow that will be kick-started. But I want to bring in Zaid, who's going to give us more details, because this has been such a long battle, one that has even come back from court.
Yes, you have to remember that this Commission of Inquiry was a direct result of the family's litigation. One of the things they asked for was that the President institute this Commission of Inquiry. And as part of the initial discussions around settling that case, the President agreed to institute this commission. And, finally it's going to have its first sitting tomorrow.
Because of the fact that obviously most of this happened during the times of apartheid era, is there possibility of getting the justice that the families may be looking for?
Well, we have to separate out two issues. One is that these crimes occurred during the apartheid era and ought to have been investigated and prosecuted. So those processes, where it's still possible to get justice for the families, those avenues are still being pursued. But this inquiry is really about the fact that when the state had the opportunity and the obligation to investigate, it did not do so. And so many cases have lapsed. There's simply no prospect of any justice. And what the families are asking for is why, when the state had the opportunity to investigate and prosecute, it did not do so.
And of course there's allegations that, like you're saying, the family is asking why, allegations of the fact that there was some form of interference. Do you think then we will see accountability from the side of the state?
That is the big question. We are absolutely sure that there was interference. And, even now, 20 years later, there is still the possibility of progress in some cases, and that's just a demonstration of what progress would have been possible. So this is not an oversight, it wasn't a mistake, it was a deliberate act on the part of the state to not prosecute those cases. Are we going to be able to find out exactly what happened? Who gave the instructions? Who followed the instructions? That is a question we still have to answer. We hope that that will be the outcome, that the Commission will find that the parties responsible perverted the cause of justice and ought to be prosecuted themselves.
And of course, there are various families that are going to be part of this, that are represented. Take us through to some of them, with the sort of issues that maybe they have put forward and the impact of this.
Yeah, so I guess one of the families that will be testifying is Lucanio Malata, one of the sons of the Craddock Four. And that is a case where they were killed in 1984 or 1985, and the perpetrators were denied amnesty at the Truth Commission. So in the early 2000s, when these perpetrators were still alive, there was the opportunity to prosecute them. And that simply didn't happen. And we waited until 2021, 22, when there was again the possibility that we would have a prosecution, but the NPA delayed. And the last perpetrator has now passed away some years ago. So the families have been left without any recourse to justice. No one, as far as we can tell, will serve any time or be brought to account for the murder of the Kraddock Four. And for the families, that means that the faith they placed in the state, that the state, the democratically elected state, would fulfill its obligations. And of course, the victims here aren't simply just run-of-the-mill people. These are people who gave their lives for the democracy we enjoy. And so it's a heavy responsibility on the state to treat their sacrifices with the dignity and respect they deserved. And the state failed to do that. And it's a very painful experience for the families. And that is why they'd like answers now. How could this happen? And for us, from the Foundation's perspective, it's also a question of how can we stop this happening again? How can we be in a position where 5 or 10 years from now, people ask, why weren't those cases prosecuted? Was it because some politicians decided that, they're not worth prosecuting? And what can we do about it? We don't want to be in that position. So we want to hold people to account for not doing their jobs. That's what we want. And we want to put in place a system where people are compelled to do their jobs.
And just as a parting question, can the people that were told to do their job say that we were told not to? Is that a legal standing?
We are hoping that they'll be able to come forward and tell us what happened. Of course, saying I broke the law because I followed instructions is no defense. All the people responsible, whether they were officials, prosecutors, politicians, all of them ought to be held to account. Because it's a systemic failure, but you've broken the law. You need to be held accountable for that.
Thank you very much for speaking to us. There is Zaid Kimmie. He is a part of the Foundation for the Human Rights, and of course giving us details just around what will be happening, which we're expecting for that commission to start on Monday. Very crucial for the families that are seeking for answers.
Appreciate your time.